Today I want to talk to you about the Protoss versus Terran matchup, and in particular talk about it from the Protoss player's point of view. As you may be aware, at the end of last year we had a massive balance change to StarCraft 2 that changed up pretty much all of the multiplayer matchups. However, in particular Protoss versus Terran was hit quite hard. For a while Terran players were winning the vast majority at the professional level of play, and Protoss was sort of struggling. However, in particular over the last month or two, I would really say like the last month or two has been kind of like a tipping point, I suppose. Protoss has all of a sudden started looking significantly more powerful, and it's mostly due to two things. First off, we had a minor change to the Liberator as well as the Widowmine. They're now a little bit weaker against the Protoss pieces, but more importantly, Protoss has been going for this new strategy that is all about the Adept as well as the Phoenix. Now today we're gonna have a look at two games right here that ShowTime recently played against Alive. In both of the games he goes for the Adept Phoenix style, however he has got a bit of a different approach. We'll have a look right here first off at the game on Cactus Valley Alley, and on this one he plays a much more passive, a laid-back strategy, whereas in game number 2 he will go for the much more aggressive variant as well, which is probably due to the strategy that Alive is playing, but regardless, this is a really cool style to play. Now, one of the critiques that, StarCraft 2 players have had about Protoss for a long time is that oftentimes they just simply make a death ball of stuff and then A-move across the map, right? That's like an argument that you've heard players mention for a very long time. Now, this strategy is everything but this. Okay, it's a very difficult to approach tile, and the main reason for that is that since you are going for Adepts and Phoenixes in the early game, right, you're not gonna have any detection. And as you may be aware, if you are going up against the Terran player, Widowmines are going to be a big issue, in particular when, for example, Terran goes for like the 6 Marines and then a Widowmine into a medevac and they drop it into your mineral line. Now, for the longest time, Protoss didn't really attempt a strategy like this, mainly because they didn't really know how to deal with the Widowmine, or at the very least that's the assumption that I'm making. However, recently Protoss players have figured out that if you can lift up the Widowmine before it burrows, that means you can shut it down with a photon overcharge absolutely brilliantly, and then the follow-up with the Phoenixes is just so powerful because you can shoot down dropships, you can get rid of Liberator aggression, and you can keep on lifting up a lot of the high-tier units, such as, for example, Immortals, or not Immortals, rather, such as, for example, like Widowmines, but basically anything scary that the Terran player has, for example, also the Siege Tank. Anyway, as far as the early gameplay goes, we got the following strategy. We see a pylon first, then a gateway follow-up into a gas geyser. Initially, ShowTime only puts a single probe on the gas geyser so he can get his nexus up a little bit faster, as well as the cybernetic score. The follow-up afterwards is to put 2 more probes into the gas to fill it up all the way until 3. He goes for the second assimilator here as well, and then a pylon at the front to deal with any kind of early game aggression. Now, ShowTime plays, generally speaking, a very safe style, and that's what I really like about his strategy and the way he approaches the game. So right when the cybernetic score finishes up, he doesn't get greedy, he goes for the Adept right here very shortly, as well as the Mothership core, and the reason for that is that he's now going to be capable of shutting down this very first Reaper very easily. Now, I believe in game number 1 here, he decides to go for 2 Adepts out of this first gateway, but very shortly the follow-up after this aggression here, or after shutting down the Reaper, is to already go for the Stargate very shortly. Now, in this particular match, he does get a little aggressive as well. He puts down a pylon here at the front of his opponent's base, recognizing the build that Alive is going for here. We'll be able to photon overcharge this pylon. That's really besides the point here. While it is definitely a cool strategy and something that you can consider using a little bit yourself as well, not really the point of this game, but it does look really cool. Either way though, the execution of ShowTime in these games is so very clean that I'm having a hard time to see exactly what Alive could have done to prevent this strategy from working out as well as it does right here, right? So the idea here is, by the way, to simply photon overcharge a single supply depot and to hopefully supply block your opponent here as well. But you can already see really what ShowTime is trying to do is build up that big economy and really prevent his opponent from getting a lot of economy himself here as well. So the first Stargate is already going down. It's also going to be the only Stargate that he goes for in this particular match. But you can see that he's being quite active with the units that he's got. Now, he will need to recall with the couple of units here. And while the Adepts were also moving across the map, the first 2 that he made, they're not going to be able to do a whole lot against that very first Cyclone. Now, here's the cool part, right? By going for this aggressive style here already, and forcing that Cyclone out, that immediately means that any kind of Widowmine play would be significantly delayed, as well as any kind of medevac play, right? Because Alive had to invest quite a few resources in trying to get this Cyclone out reasonably early on into this game. However, you can see that there's still the potential here for the Terran player to go for the follow-up. Now here's what ShowTime does. He starts building up his Phoenix count, and while he didn't really like necessarily rush out this Stargate, he just like continuously pumps out these Phoenixes throughout the earlier stages of this game. So he's not being like super aggressive with them, he's just simply rallying them wherever he feels like he needs them the most. But really he's just trying to get himself a significant amount of Phoenixes out to get rid of all of the early game Terran aggression. On top of that, of course, he's getting himself a few additional gateways here. He's going up to 3 for the earlier stages of the game, after which he can start warping in the Adepts. Now, off of this alone, right, so he goes for a single Stargate and he starts pumping a few Phoenixes, as well as the Mothership Core, as well as 3 gateways. That's when he grabs himself a 3rd base. So really like a super early 3rd base expansion here from the Protoss player, and this seems to be his go-to style in pretty much every single Protoss versus Terran that I've seen him play, in particular over the last few weeks. It's a really, really common style and a really common approach, I suppose. Regardless though, it's cool to see how this works out. So you can see like a bunch of additional gateways did just finish up, and he's going to be able to put these units into the main base. Now here the dropship does come in, and this is what I'm talking about, right? So of course, if you are feeling confident enough with the adepts that you have, you can just simply go ahead and shut down the Widowmine before it does anything. However, if there would have been, say, for example, only a single adept, what ShowTime would have done instead is to start shooting down or start lifting up that Widowmine instead and get rid of it that way. At the same time though, the Phoenix opener here will be very helpful in shutting down this aggression here from the Terran player. You can see that of course Phoenixes can shoot and attack at the same time, or move and attack at the same time regardless. So that does mean that this dropship will get shut down, and at this point Protoss is going to be in a very happy state already. So really notice, right? Really no like particular risk were taken in these earlier stages of the game. ShowTime simply went for a bunch of adepts, he started pumping a few Phoenixes, and while sure he did some aggression here on the other end of the map, that was really only like a 100 mineral investment, or really nothing too nothing too terrifying, you know, regardless. You can see though, like supply-wise, it's already 65 versus 47 in favor of the Protoss player, and that's huge. On top of that, he's got himself that 3rd Nexus already good to go, and there's nowhere to be, like there's nowhere a 3rd command center to be seen right now, which is crazy because when you consider this all, that means that ShowTime at this point is going to be the one significantly ahead, while very little has gone down in this match so far, and that's really what makes this style so very good. So ShowTime once again approaching this one safely, right? Like I said, he is just simply gonna sit back and start producing more and more of these Phoenixes. Now, of course, Phoenixes are very fast unit. They're faster than anything the Terran player can make, I'm pretty sure. With maybe the exception of Hellions, but regardless, that's not really a threat to them. That does mean that you could get aggressive with them as well. Instead, ShowTime puts them in defensive positions here to try and deal with any kind of incoming aggression. Be it, for example, a Liberator, or be it, for example, a dropship. And once again, it gets to this point where, you know, the Liberator comes in and he just starts to just simply shooting that one down very, very handily, and it won't be able to do any damage whatsoever. Now, real quick, right, if we back up for just a bit, let's see the follow-up here that the Protoss player goes for. So while he's still producing, you know, that 3rd base, as well as more and more Phoenixes, ShowTime has already thrown up the robotics facility. And what he's going to do here is start pumping out these upgrades, as well as, you know, the Twilight Council upgrades for the Adepts here too. On top of that, what he's looking for is to get a bunch of Colossi out as well. Because when you think about it, the real counter to this strategy from the Terran player's point of view is probably just simply a bunch of bio units. A lot of Marines will do just fine. So that means that if he gets a couple of Colossi out, he's going to be in a superior choice. So very, very shortly, he will be adding on the robotics bay as well. Now notice, after shooting down that Liberator, apparently he is feeling confident enough to move across the map. But in really like none of the instances is ShowTime taking any risks. He's obviously looking out for these little potholes to see if he can potentially do, or potentially like not lose anything to, for example, you know, a Widowmine. But regardless, while he does trade one Phoenix there for a Liberator, this is of course still great for him because he can continuously keep on producing this. But still, he's establishing himself that 3rd base expansion, right? And while taking very, very little risks here in the earlier stages of the game, Income-wise, it's heavily in favor of the Protoss player at this point in time. +1 attack is being researched now. We do also see the upgrade here for the Adepts, and additional gateways are now also being added on. So there's 3 more here on top of the 3 that were already active, and just continuous warpins right now of Adepts should put him at the advantage that he was already securing here in the earlier stages of the game. So notice, he's not really like rushing out any additional tech, right? It's 6.5 minutes into the game, and only just now do we see the robotics bay being added on here. He's also not really rushing out these upgrades, just really taking this as a very like safe and very secure kind of approach. So he sees that the Terran player has started moving across the map here, and the nice thing is about this that while there are indeed a few Widow Mines in these medevacs, very shortly you'll be able to notice that with the amount of units that ShowTime has, he's going to be able to shut this down very, very easily. Now, the second nice thing about these units is that, of course, if Terran would decide to pick up and move across the map and, like, simply go for the dropship on the other end, he's gonna be able to pick up all of the dropships that are trying to drop into his main base with the Phoenixes here as well. So he's not even really using them in this engagement whatsoever. Second robotics facility is also being added on right now with the first Colossus in production. He added that one out right when the robotics facility or the robotics bay finished up and the robotics facility started producing those Colossi. He's getting the extended thermal lens and still he's sitting back. He's got the Phoenixes in a position where apparently he's just feeling safe and confident to pick up any kind of dropships in the earlier stages of this, or not necessarily like the earlier stages anymore, but regardless, he's feeling like confident to just simply pick up whatever decides to fly across them. And he's just simply sitting back, securing himself a larger and larger army. Now, of course, apparently there is a critical mass of Phoenixes that he has reached right now where he's feeling confident enough to really not add on any additional ones. And you can see this is just an absolute pain for the Protoss player to deal with, as he can lift up pretty much everything and just get rid of all of this aggression very, very easily. Now, at the same time, Terran has indeed moved across the map, and of course that does mean that Protoss will have to deal with this. The Phoenixes are currently being flown back across the map, but the Colossi are out, and very shortly more and more will join here as well. Phoenixes will be able to intercept the dropships that head into the main base, and with that, a super safe and secure strategy has worked out absolutely brilliantly, because now that the Phoenixes are here, the Terran units will not be able to retreat, and while they desperately pick up a pylon or two here, this game is pretty much shut down and absolutely brilliantly played here by the Protoss player without really taking any risks here whatsoever. He shut down the Terran player at every single move, and with that he's got himself a fourth base secured as well, and he's just simply bringing up and building up a bigger and bigger army. Now, if you speed up the game for just a little bit, you will be able to notice here that ShowTime is just simply going to start building up a bigger and bigger and bigger force, producing even 2 Colossi at once. Right now, of course, that does mean that right when you go for the double Colossi follow-up, that immediately means that, you know, obviously, you could go for Vikings, that's the Terran player here, right? But you're gonna need a heck of a lot of them to not only shoot down the Colossi, as well as deal with the Phoenixes that are still left over. So, like, the double Colossi production just simply makes so much sense at this point in the game, and ShowTime is just gonna simply sit back here, get rid of whatever he can, lift up whatever units he can lift up, and, you know, he's just simply gonna walk across the map and clean up this game very, 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 very nicely. So notice, right, very little risks were taken here. Only just now is ShowTime moving across the map with the army that he's got, and he's just simply been shutting down his Terran opponent at every single turn. Alright, so here we are in game number 2, and really what we're looking for is similarities and like patterns compared to game number 1. And I can tell you that the early gameplay of this match is literally the exact same. As you may recall, his build order was as follows, okay? He goes for a pylon. Very shortly, he will be able to build a gateway, and as a follow-up, he goes for that assimilator. Now, in game number 1, he only put a single probe into the assimilator here initially, and guess what he does in game number 2? Nothing too surprising right there. I believe it's actually the probe that he released from the Nexus. Yeah, there we go. He puts the probe from the Nexus into the gas geyser here as well, and with the additional mineral income that he gets, he is able to get himself that Nexus up on the low ground, that he will be able to build the cybernetics core in the main base here as well. Come on, Mr. Probe. There you go. Puts additional probes into the gas afterwards. He goes for the second assimilator here too. And at the same time, he's gonna put his second pylon up at the front. So notice, right? Early game, it's literally the exact same thing. Nothing has really changed here whatsoever. Now remember, in game number 1, what we saw as well is as soon as the cybernetics core finished up, he goes for a couple of different things. First off, he builds a mothership core, he goes for the double adept play, and then he goes for the warp gate research as well. On top of that, after, getting that one started, he decided to build a pylon on the other end of the map to potentially go for a photon overcharge with as well. And guess what he does in game number 2? We see Mr. Probe already moving across, and he's going to be able to put up a pylon right here at the front. Now this time around, the Reaper was used defensively as well, because apparently Alive wasn't really having it, and this pylon does get shut down. But notice, on the other end of the map, once again, while the aggression was going on, or potentially could have been going on, ShowTime decides to go for that Stargate once more. And really, like, this is what makes this so typical, right? It's literally the exact same thing. So what we saw in game number 1, he added on 2 additional gateways very, very shortly, and he started building up that Phoenix count. Now in this game, this is the first deviation we're seeing. In this game, ShowTime is really building that third nexus off of a single gateway here instead. And I guess that either has to do with the map layout, or just simply a tell that he gets from his opponent, or just simply him noticing that his opponent didn't go for a certain amount of aggression. Regardless, this is of course a little bit greedier, but you will be able to notice here very shortly that it's also reasonably similar. It's just a bit of a different order, because the 2 gateways do still get added on. One recurring pattern here as well that he goes for pretty much every single time is that he splits up his units, right? This is a typical play of a high-level player, I suppose. He doesn't leave all of his units in a single place. He just simply spreads them out a lot more aggressively. Even though we can obviously see that there's not really any kind of aggressive drop play happening in this game, ShowTime doesn't know it, so spreading it preemptively here is most definitely the correct choice. The follow-up is once again as follows. He gets the Twilight Council as well as the Forge at the same time. He will be able to start researching the Adept upgrade here very shortly, and he will be able to go for the Attack upgrade here in the Forge here as well. So notice really, like, with some very minor deviations, this game is looking the exact same. Now ShowTime, once more, after establishing those 3 Phoenixes, apparently feels confident enough to move across the map and try and see if he can do some damage with those. But really, these Phoenixes are meant for safety, of course, right? He doesn't really want to sacrifice them, but in this match, he does stop building them a little bit earlier on. As you can see right now, he's not adding on any additional ones, and instead he goes for a faster cybernetics core, or a faster robotics facility here instead. So it is a little bit, different, and he goes back actually Phoenix production once again. It is a little bit different, but the vast, approach here is the exact same. Once more, the Phoenixes are being used in combination with the Adept and the Mothership Core to be defensive in the earlier stages of the game. He's spreading the units out to make sure that he can intercept any kind of early game drop play, but really he's building up that economy. And once again, right, you can already see that he's just simply got so much income here. 60 versus 48 Harvesters, which is a very, very substantial amount. Now remember, right, like I said, in game number 2, he's going far more aggressive. And the reason for that is that he's not adding on the robotics bay this time around, but instead he's using this one mostly for observers here, as well as a warp prism. On top of that, he added on a lot of additional gateways. You can see he doesn't really have all too many upgrades, but he's going to be capable of warping in a ton of stuff. And apparently ShowTime is now feeling confident enough to move across the map. Now, I'm assuming here that the reason why he does this is because his opponent has been far more passive in this match here as well. So he's just feeling confident enough that he just simply's got more stuff. And, truth be told, if you look at the supply counts, that most definitely is going to be true. And you notice here, he does have a whole lot of Phoenixes that he once again will be able to shut down the Liberators as well as the Widow Mines with as well. But it's just such a clean approach once again, right? It's just simply such a clean game here that there's really very little Alive could have done to really prevent this from happening. I mean, if your aggression gets shut down, as it has been in these games so far, the Terran player is just going to simply be in so much trouble. And as soon as, the Protoss manages to walk up this ramp, that's pretty much game over right then and there for the Protoss, or for the Terran player. So a very, very cool strategy, right? Not easy to execute because you have to be on top of your Phoenix control. But if you are capable of doing so, right, and you can just simply build up your Phoenix Adept army, very shortly these games will go in favor of you as well. So notice right here, he's using the Liberators to try and zone away, but at the same time, the Phoenixes are shooting down all of the Liberators, and that does mean indeed that there's just simply not a whole lot of Terran remaining here, and the liftoff is forced. At the same time, on the other end of the map, we see that 4th base has been taken, 41 SCVs have ended up falling, and once again, the Phoenix Adept style turns out to be very, very powerful. Now, of course, there are different things the Terran player can do, or Terran players rather can do to try and shut this down, right? But as it is right now, this is one of the most common strategies for Terran players to fight against, and it seems like Terran has got some issues fighting against this style as well, because if you look at it objectively, it does certainly seem like it's a very difficult thing to stop, in particular when your Protoss opponent is playing very, very well. Now, Live is going to make a bit of a last-ditch effort. You can once again see the switch here from ShowTime to start building up those Colossi, and once again he goes for the extended thermal lens, and once again he goes for the second robotics facility. Regardless though, there are simply just so many units here for the Terran player, or for the Protoss player here, that really, like, regardless of what's going on, there's just simply not really going to be enough, and Terran will end up killing a base here, but he's not going to be able to obtain the victory here, just because of the sheer amount of stuff that's happening on the other end of the map, as well as, you know, ShowTime just playing it very safely. He's sacrificing a base that was practically already fully mined out. He decides to commit off it, or edit rather, after a little while. The Terran army does get shut down, and GG is indeed forced. So I hope you enjoyed watching this kind of video. I absolutely adore talking about strategies in StarCraft 2, and, you know, in particular when it's like a new school kind of style, right? A strategy that we really haven't seen very much of in the past. You know, it's just simply so cool to see it develop, and to still see it like change up as well over the next couple of months. I'm really curious what Protoss versus Terran will look like in about a half year from now, because it looks like Protoss players are slowly grabbing more and more terrain in the matchup, and I wonder what Terran players will decide to reinforce this with as well, because I'm sure they're not looking to take all of the losses like they are right now. Of course, it does depend as well on like balance changes. As it is right now, it's currently right around 50-50 or so, but it seems like the top level Protoss players, like for example ShowTime, are just getting better and better and better at executing these styles, that is going to be also more difficult for the Terran players to actually defend against it. And I wouldn't be surprised if the skills will tip in favor of Protoss for just a little bit in just a month or two. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. If you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. While you're at it, you can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Links are in the description of the video. I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.